The dust rose in thick clouds around the branding corral, as Olivia Preston threw down another ranch hand twice her size, her hands moving with the practiced precision of someone who had wrestled cattle since she could walk. The spring morning in Jerome, Arizona, burned hot even though it was only 1882, and the sun beat mercilessly on the rocky terrain that surrounded the copper mining town, perched precariously on Mingus Mountain. She had arrived 3 days ago with nothing but a worn saddlebag and boots that had seen better years. Desperate for work after her father's ranch in New Mexico had been foreclosed by the bank. The telegram she had received 2 months prior still burned in her memory, the words stark and unforgiving. Property seized, father deceased, no funds remaining. The ranch hands laughed and hollered as another man stepped up to challenge her. This one named Buck, with arms like tree trunks and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She had already bested 7 men that morning, proving she could handle the rough work of spring branding despite wearing a split riding skirt instead of trousers. The foreman had been skeptical when she showed up asking for work, but the ranch was short-handed and desperate, so he had agreed to let her prove herself. Buck lunged forward, trying to grab the calf she was wrestling, but Olivia anticipated his move. She shifted her weight, using his momentum against him, and suddenly he was face down in the dirt while she pressed her knee firmly into the calf's shoulder, holding it steady as the branding iron hissed against hide. The smell of singed hair filled the air, mixing with the scent of sage and copper dust that perpetually hung over Jerome. From his position leaning against the corral fence, Ryan Kincaid watched with eyes the color of storm clouds. He had ridden into town that morning from his spread 30 miles south, bringing a string of horses to sell to the mining company. The commotion at the branding corral had drawn him over, and for the past 20 minutes he had been mesmerized by the young woman who moved with such fierce determination. She was not traditionally beautiful in the delicate way that society preferred, but there was something striking about her strong jawline, the way her dark blonde hair escaped its braid to stick to her sweat-dampened neck, and the absolute fire in her green eyes. Another hand stepped up, then another. Olivia's arms trembled with exhaustion, but she refused to show weakness. Her father had taught her that showing weakness was the fastest way to lose respect, and respect was currency in this harsh land. Each calf she wrestled down, each brand she helped apply, was another nail in the coffin of doubt that surrounded her. The foreman, a grizzled man named Dutch Henderson, scratched his gray beard and glanced at Ryan. Never seen anything like it in 30 years of ranching. Ryan said nothing, just continued watching. There was something about the way she moved, the determination in every gesture, that spoke of desperation wrapped in pride. He recognized it because he had worn the same expression 5 years ago when he had arrived in Arizona territory with nothing but a wild Mustang and a dream of building something permanent. When the last calf was finally branded and released, wobbling back to its mother on unsteady legs, Olivia stood and wiped her face with her sleeve. Her shoulders ached, her hands were raw despite her gloves, and she was fairly certain she had pulled something in her back. But she was still standing, and that was what mattered. The ranch hands gathered around, some grudgingly respectful, others openly admiring. Dutch Henderson walked into the corral, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. He stopped in front of Olivia, his weathered face unreadable. "You have got more grit than half my crew combined," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "But grit does not pay wages, and I already told you we are full up on hands." Olivia's heart sank, but she kept her chin high. "I can do the work of 2 men, I just proved that." "That you did." Dutch glanced back at the fence where Ryan stood. But this is not my decision to make. Confusion flickered across Olivia's face as Dutch gestured toward Ryan. The cowboy pushed off from the fence and walked into the corral with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting and a few days of stubble on his strong jaw. His clothes were worn but well maintained, his gun belt sat low on his hips, and there was something in his eyes that suggested he did not miss much. "This here is Ryan Kincaid," Dutch said. "Owns the Double K Ranch south of here. This branding is for his stock. We are just leasing this corral and providing the labor." Olivia felt heat rise to her face that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. She had been showing off for a foreman who had no authority to hire her. The realization stung, adding humiliation to her exhaustion. Ryan stopped a few feet away, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. Up close, she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting against the sun, the small scar on his chin, the way his shoulders filled out his faded blue shirt. He was probably 26 or 27, she guessed, young to own a ranch but clearly someone who had earned it through hard work rather than inheritance. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice a low drawl that suggested he was originally from somewhere further south, maybe Texas or Oklahoma. "Olivia Preston," she answered, meeting his gaze directly even though every instinct told her to look away. "I can handle any work you need done. I grew up on a cattle ranch in New Mexico. I can rope, ride, brand, mend fence, break horses if needed. I am not asking for charity, just a fair chance." Ryan crossed his arms over his chest. "Why are you looking for work in Jerome? This is mining country, not exactly known for its ranching opportunities." "Because I needed work, and this is where the stagecoach brought me when my money ran out," Olivia said, the honesty coming easier than she expected. "My father died 2 months ago. The bank took everything. I have been traveling west ever since, looking for work. Jerome is not where I plan to stop, but sometimes life does not care about plans." Something shifted in Ryan's expression, a softening around his eyes that suggested he understood loss. "Dutch, pay out the hands for today. We are done here." He turned to walk away, and Olivia felt her last hope crumbling. She had gambled everything on this demonstration, had pushed herself past exhaustion to prove her worth, and it still was not enough. The unfairness of it burned in her throat. "Wait," she called out, taking a step forward. "I need this work. I have got $6 to my name and nowhere to go. I can do anything you need, work any hours. I am not afraid of hard work or rough conditions." Ryan paused and looked back at her over his shoulder. For a long moment he said nothing, just studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Then, without any preamble or ceremony, he said, "You start tomorrow. Be at the Double K by sunrise. Dutch can give you directions." He walked away before she could respond, his long strides carrying him across the dusty ground toward where his horse was tied. Olivia stood frozen, her exhausted brain struggling to process what had just happened. Around her, the ranch hands began to disperse, some clapping her on the shoulder as they passed, others muttering amongst themselves. Dutch stepped closer, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You made an impression, girl. Ryan is not one to hire on a whim. He sees something in you." "I just need the work," Olivia said, but her voice came out shakier than she intended. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her trembling and dizzy. "When was the last time you ate?" Dutch asked, his gruff voice gentler now. Olivia tried to remember. She had bought a stale biscuit yesterday morning, and before that, there had been some jerky the day before. "I am fine. You look about ready to fall over." Dutch pulled a wrapped bundle from his saddlebag and thrust it at her. Take this. Cannot have you keeling over before you even start work. The Double K is a 3-hour ride south. You have a horse, a mule, Olivia admitted. Not fast, but reliable. That will do. Head straight south from here, follow the creek bed when you come to it, and you will run right into the ranch. Big wooden gate with a Double K brand burned into the crossbeam. Cannot miss it. Olivia unwrapped the bundle to find bread, cheese, and dried apples. Her stomach growled loudly, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. Kindness felt strange after so many weeks of hardship. Thank you. Save your thanks for staying upright long enough to make it to the ranch, Dutch said, but his eyes were kind. Ryan is a fair boss, but he expects full effort. You give him that and you will do fine. That evening, Olivia sat on the edge of her rented bed in the tiny room above the general store and counted her remaining money for the third time. $6.40. The room cost 50 cents a night. Her mule needed feed, and she had to eat something. She calculated that she could survive maybe 8 more days if she was careful, less if anything unexpected happened. She unwrapped the cloth binding on her right hand, wincing at the blisters that had formed despite her gloves. The work today had been brutal, but it had been necessary. She had to prove herself, had to show that she was worth taking a chance on. The fact that Ryan Kincaid had given her that chance still felt surreal. Through the thin walls, she could hear the sounds of Jerome settling in for the night. Piano music drifted up from the saloon below. Miners laughed and shouted. Somewhere a dog barked incessantly. The town clung to the mountainside like a stubborn tick, its buildings perched at odd angles on the steep terrain. It was a rough place, full of rough men chasing copper dreams, and it was not where she wanted to build a life. But the Double K Ranch, that might be different. 3 hours south meant lower elevation, probably better grazing land away from the mining operations. It meant cattle and horses and honest work under open sky. It meant a chance to start rebuilding what she had lost. Olivia lay back on the lumpy mattress and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Her father's face swam in her memory, weathered and kind, always smelling of tobacco and leather. He had taught her everything about ranching, had never treated her differently for being a girl. When her mother died of influenza when Olivia was 12, it had been just the two of them against the world. "You are as strong as any man, Livy," he used to say. "Do not let anyone tell you different." She had believed him, had grown up confident in her abilities. But then the drought came, lasting 3 brutal years. The cattle died, the debts mounted, and her father aged 10 years in one. When the bank foreclosed, he had simply given up. The doctor said it was his heart, but Olivia knew better. He had died of a broken spirit, of seeing his life's work crumble into dust. She would not let that happen to her. She would work harder, be tougher, prove that she could not only survive but thrive. And if that meant wrestling calves and earning the respect of rough cowboys one brutal day at a time, then that was what she would do. Sleep came slowly, punctuated by the sounds of the town and the ache in her muscles. When dawn crept through her single window, Olivia was already awake, splashing water on her face from the chipped basin and braiding her hair with stiff fingers. She had no mirror, but she knew she looked rough. Her split riding skirt was dusty, her shirt had a tear at the elbow, and her boots were scuffed beyond repair. But her clothes were clean, her hat was serviceable, and her pride was intact. She paid the store owner for her room, bought a small sack of cornmeal and some beans with precious coins, and loaded her meager possessions onto her mule. The animal, a steady gray gelding named Chester, turned his head to look at her with patient brown eyes. "Just one more journey," she told him, stroking his soft nose. "Then maybe we can settle for a while." The ride south was beautiful in the way that harsh landscapes can be. The sun rose over red rock formations, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels, their arms raised to the sky. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermal currents, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. Olivia followed Dutch's directions, finding the creek bed he had mentioned and following its winding path through increasingly green terrain. The elevation dropped, the air grew slightly less arid, and cottonwood trees began to appear along the water's edge. This was better ranching country. She could see that immediately. There was actual grass here, not just the sparse desert scrub that dominated the higher elevations. The sun was well up when she finally spotted the gate. The Double K brand was indeed burned into the crossbeam, the wood weathered but sturdy. The fence stretched in both directions, well-maintained and strong. Beyond it, she could see rolling pasture dotted with cattle, a cluster of buildings in the middle distance, and the mountains rising purple and imposing on the horizon. She dismounted to open the gate, leading Chester through before carefully closing it behind her. Basic ranch etiquette, her father's voice reminded her. Always leave gates as you find them. The main house came into view as she rode up the dirt track. It was a solid adobe structure with a covered porch and glass windows, surprisingly well appointed for what she had expected. Beyond it stood a barn, several corrals, a bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Chickens scattered as she approached, and a black and white dog came bounding up, barking but with its tail wagging. "Shep, quiet," a voice called, and Ryan emerged from the barn. He had clearly been working already, his shirt sleeves rolled up and sweat dampening the fabric. He stopped when he saw her, and something like approval crossed his face. "You made it. I was not entirely sure you would." "I said I would be here," Olivia replied, dismounting. Her legs protested after the 3-hour ride on top of yesterday's exertion, but she forced herself to stand straight. "Actions matter more than words in this business," Ryan said, walking closer. In the morning light, she could see the details she had missed yesterday, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the strength in his sun-browned forearms, the way he moved with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his environment. But showing up is a good start. "Come on, I will introduce you to the rest of the crew and show you where you will be staying." He led her toward the bunkhouse, a long, low building with a door at each end. "We have got 5 hands, including you now. The other 4 are out checking the South Range fence, but they will be back by noon. You will bunk in the small cabin around back. It is not much, but it is private and dry." "I do not need special treatment," Olivia said quickly. "I can bunk with the men." Ryan stopped and looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "That is not about special treatment, it is about practicality. 4 men who have been working together for 2 years do not need the complication of a woman in their space, and you do not need the discomfort of no privacy. The cabin has a good stove, a decent bed, and it is only 20 feet from the pump. Trust me, you will appreciate it after a 14-hour day." He said it matter-of-factly, without any hint of condescension, and Olivia found herself nodding. "All right, thank you." The cabin was indeed small, maybe 12 feet square, but it was clean and well-maintained. A narrow bed occupied one corner, a small table and chair sat beneath the single window, and a pot-belly stove crouched in the opposite corner. Someone had left a folded quilt on the bed and a lantern on the table. "Get settled in," Ryan said from the doorway. "Then come find me in the barn. We have got work to do." Over the following weeks, Olivia learned the rhythms of the Double K Ranch. She rose before dawn, worked until dark, and fell into bed so exhausted that sleep came instantly. The work was brutal and unrelenting. everything from mending fence to mucking stalls to helping deliver a breech calf at midnight. But it was honest work, and she was getting paid, and slowly she began to feel like maybe she could build something here. The other ranch hands had been skeptical at first. Hank was the oldest, probably 50, with a limp from an old riding accident and a wealth of knowledge about cattle. Miguel was in his 30s, quiet and efficient, originally from Sonora, and the best roper Olivia had ever seen. The twins, Jack and John Sullivan, were 23 and identical except for a scar on John's cheek. They treated the ranch work like a competition, always trying to outdo each other, but they were skilled and hardworking. They tested her at first, giving her the worst jobs, watching to see if she would complain or fail. She did neither. When Hank assigned her to clean out the chicken coop, she did it without comment. When Miguel handed her a post hole digger and pointed to a quarter-mile of fence line that needed new posts, she started digging. When the twins challenged her to a roping competition, she beat them both and then offered to show them her technique. Gradually, their respect shifted from grudging to genuine. She was not as strong as they were, but she was smart about using leverage and technique. She could not rope as well as Miguel, but she could outride any of them. And she never, ever complained. Ryan watched all of this with quiet approval. He was not a talkative boss, preferring to lead by example rather than lengthy explanations. He worked harder than any of his hands, was always the first up and the last to bed, and he expected everyone to pull their weight. But he was also scrupulously fair, paid on time, and made sure there was always good food on the table. Olivia found herself watching him more than she should. The way he gentled a nervous horse with patient hands and a soft voice. The way he could read the sky and predict weather with uncanny accuracy. The way he never asked anyone to do something he would not do himself. He was everything her father had been, and she felt her heart tug in dangerous directions whenever he was near. One evening in late May, after a particularly long day of moving cattle to fresh grazing, the crew gathered on the bunkhouse porch to eat dinner. Maria, an older Mexican woman who lived in town but came out 3 times a week to cook and clean, had made beef stew with fresh tortillas, and the men ate with the single-minded focus of the truly hungry. Olivia sat slightly apart, as she usually did, her plate balanced on her knees. She was dirty and tired and probably smelled like cattle, but the food was good and the evening air was cool, and she felt, for the first time in months, a sense of belonging. "Preston," Ryan called from where he leaned against the porch post. "Need to talk to you about tomorrow." She set her plate down and walked over, conscious of the other men pretending not to listen. "Yes, sir. Stop calling me sir. It makes me feel ancient," he said with a slight smile. "Ryan is fine. We have got a buyer coming to look at horses tomorrow. I want you to help me show them. You have got the best seat on a horse of anyone here, and I need someone who can make even the green broke ones look good." Pride swelled in her chest. "I can do that. I know you can. That is why I am asking." He pushed off from the post and walked down the steps, gesturing for her to follow. They wandered toward the main corral where several horses dozed in the evening cool. "You have been here almost a month now. You settling in all right?" "Yes," Olivia said. "The work is good. The crew is fair. I am grateful for the opportunity." Ryan was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horses. "You do not have to be so formal all the time. You have proved yourself 10 times over." "Habits are hard to break," she admitted. "I spent my whole life having to prove I was as good as any man. It does not come naturally to relax." "I imagine not." He turned to face her, and in the fading light his eyes were dark and unreadable. "For what it is worth, you do not have to prove anything to me. I saw what I needed to see that first day in Jerome. Then why did you hire me?" The question came out before she could stop it. I have been wondering ever since. You could have hired any of those men. Some of them probably had more experience. Ryan was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because I saw someone fighting to survive with every ounce of strength they had. I recognized it because I have been there. 5 years ago, I arrived in Arizona territory with nothing. I worked as a cowhand, saved every penny, slept in barns when I could not afford a room. It took me 3 years to scrape together enough to buy this land and build something. When I saw you in that corral, refusing to give up even though you were clearly exhausted, I saw myself. And I figured anyone with that much determination deserved a chance." His honesty took her breath away. She had assumed he came from money, that the ranch was family land. Knowing he had built it from nothing, just like she was trying to do, changed something fundamental in how she saw him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing that, for giving me the chance." "You have earned everything you have gotten here," Ryan said firmly. "Do not forget that." They stood there in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to emerge. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed softly. The evening breeze carried the scent of sage and dust and growing things. And Olivia felt something shift in her chest, some careful wall beginning to crumble. The horse showing the next day went better than expected. The buyer, a mining company manager looking to upgrade their wagon teams, was impressed by the quality of Ryan's stock and Olivia's horsemanship. She rode each horse with confidence, showing off their gaits and temperaments, answering questions about their training and disposition. By the end of the afternoon, the buyer had purchased 6 horses at a price that made Ryan's eyes light up. "You have got a real talent there," the buyer said, nodding toward Olivia as Ryan wrote up the bill of sale. "Most cowboys are good riders, but she has got something extra. The horses trust her." "She is one of my best hands," Ryan said, and the pride in his voice made Olivia's heart skip. After the buyer left, trailing his new horses behind a wagon, Ryan turned to Olivia with a grin that transformed his usually serious face. "That sale just paid for the new windmill I have been needing and then some. We are celebrating tonight. Tell the boys we are having steaks and Maria's peach cobbler." The celebration was simple but joyful. Maria had been warned in advance and arrived with not just cobbler but also fresh bread and green beans from her garden. The crew gathered around the long table in the ranch house kitchen, talking and laughing as they ate. Even quiet Miguel told stories about his childhood in Sonora, and the twins got into a friendly argument about which of them had roped more steers that week. Olivia found herself relaxing in a way she had not since before her father died. The food was delicious, the company was good, and for once she did not feel like she had to guard every word or action. She caught Ryan watching her from across the table, a soft expression on his face, and when their eyes met he smiled in a way that made her stomach flip. After dinner, as the hands drifted back to the bunkhouse and Maria packed up her things, Olivia helped Ryan wash dishes. It was a domestic task that felt strangely intimate, their hands brushing occasionally in the soapy water, working in comfortable rhythm. "You looked happy tonight," Ryan observed, handing her a plate to dry. "I was," Olivia admitted. "It has been a long time since I felt like I belonged somewhere." "You belong here," he said, and the certainty in his voice made her look up. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I hope you know that." The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest as Ryan reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered for just a moment, warm against her skin, and she saw something in his eyes that mirrored the confusing feelings that had been growing in her own chest. "Ryan," she started, not sure what she was going to say. A knock on the door broke the moment. Hank stuck his head in, oblivious to the tension he had interrupted. "Boss, sorry to bother, but we have got a problem in the north pasture. Looks like someone cut the fence and we are missing about a dozen head." The softness in Ryan's expression vanished, replaced by hard calculation. "Rustlers? Looks like it. Fresh cut. Tracks heading north toward the territorial road." Ryan was already moving, grabbing his gun belt from the hook by the door. "Get the boys mounted. We need to track them before the trail goes cold." He glanced back at Olivia. "Stay here and keep watch on the ranch." "I can ride with you," she protested. "I need someone I trust watching the place," he said firmly. "If they hit the north pasture, they might come back for more. You are the best shot after Miguel. Keep your rifle close and do not hesitate to use it if you need to." Then he was gone, his boots thundering across the porch. Within minutes, she heard the sound of horses galloping north, and then silence settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket. Olivia spent the night on the porch, her rifle across her knees, every sense on high alert. The moon rose full and bright, casting everything in silver light. Shadows moved and shifted, making her heart race, but nothing materialized. Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Dawn was breaking when she finally heard horses approaching. She stood, rifle ready, and then relaxed as she recognized Ryan in the lead. The men looked exhausted and frustrated, and she counted only 11 cattle trailing behind them. Ryan dismounted heavily, his face grim. "Lost the trail about 10 miles north. They knew what they were doing, split up and scattered. We recovered what we could." "Anyone hurt?" Olivia asked, scanning the weary men. "Just our pride," Ryan said. "And our stock numbers. Those were good breeding cows." Over the next few weeks, the rustling problem escalated. Twice more they lost cattle, and once someone tried to steal horses from the corral in the middle of the night. Ryan reported it to the territorial marshal, but that office was understaffed and overwhelmed. The law was spread thin in Arizona territory, and most ranchers were left to handle their own problems. The crew took turns standing night watch, and the easy atmosphere of the ranch became tense. Everyone was exhausted from working all day, and then staying up half the night on guard. Tempers frayed, and twice Olivia had to step between the twins when their competitive nature turned into actual fighting. Ryan grew quieter, more withdrawn, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Olivia watched him worry and wanted desperately to help, but did not know how. The ranch that had begun to feel like home now felt besieged. One evening in mid-June, Ryan called her to the ranch house after dinner. She found him in the small office off the kitchen, paperwork spread across the desk, a half-full glass of whiskey at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, and she was shocked by the exhaustion in his face. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I need to talk to you about something." Olivia sat, worry coiling in her stomach. "What is it?" "I have been going over the books. Between the lost stock and the extra costs of night watches and repairs, we are bleeding money. If this keeps up, I am going to have to let someone go." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I do not want to do it. Every hand here is skilled and loyal, but I cannot pay wages if the ranch goes under." "You are thinking of letting me go," Olivia said quietly, "because I am the newest." "That would be the fair way to do it," Ryan agreed, but his voice was strained. "But no, I am not letting you go. You are too valuable. If it comes to it, I will probably have to let one of the twins go, and that will break up their partnership." Relief and guilt warred in Olivia's chest. "That is not right. They have been here longer." "But you work harder and complain less," Ryan said bluntly. "This is not about fairness, Olivia. This is about survival. I have put everything I have into this ranch. If it fails, I am back to nothing." He picked up the whiskey glass and drained it. "I am telling you this because you deserve to know what we are facing, and because I trust you." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep in Olivia's heart. She stood and walked around the desk, acting on instinct rather than thought. She placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. "We will figure this out," she said firmly. "You have built something good here, Ryan. You are not going to lose it." He reached up and covered her hand with his own, his palm warm and rough with calluses. For a long moment they stayed like that, connected by touch and shared determination. Then Ryan stood, and suddenly they were face to face, inches apart, and the air between them crackled with tension that had been building for weeks. "Olivia," he said, her name rough in his throat. "I need to tell you something." "What?" she whispered, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I am falling in love with you." The words came out stark and honest. "I know the timing is terrible and the situation is complicated, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel it. You are the strongest, most determined person I have ever met, and somewhere along the way you stopped being just a ranch hand and became something essential to me." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I feel it too. I have been trying not to because it seemed foolish, falling for my boss, but I cannot help it. You make me feel safe and valued and like maybe I could build a real life here." Ryan reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she had not realized were falling. "Then we will build it together. We will figure out the rustlers, save the ranch, and make something that lasts." When he kissed her, it was gentle and fierce all at once, full of promise and desperation. Olivia melted into it, her arms coming up around his neck, feeling like she had finally come home after months of wandering. They stood there in the small office, holding each other as if they could ward off all the troubles of the world through sheer determination. The kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent. Ryan's hand slid down to her waist, pulling her closer, and Olivia responded with equal passion. Months of tension and suppressed attraction surged between them, and for a moment nothing existed but the two of them and the feelings they had finally admitted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." "Me too," Olivia admitted, her voice shaky. "What happens now? Now we face this together," Ryan said. "As partners in every sense of the word." He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "I know we have not been courting properly and this is probably too fast, but I do not care about convention. I care about you and I want you in my life, not just as a ranch hand but as something more." "I want that too," Olivia said, her heart full to bursting. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." They were interrupted by shouting from outside. Ryan grabbed his gun and they rushed to the porch to find Miguel riding in hard, his horse lathered with sweat. "Rustlers hit the south herd," he called. "They have got at least 20 head and they are heading for the border. Hank and the twins are tracking them, but they need help." Ryan was already moving, whistling for his horse. "How long ago?" "Maybe an hour. I rode straight here when we spotted them." Olivia ran for her own horse, ignoring Ryan's protest. "I am coming with you. You need every gun you can get." There was no time to argue. Within minutes they were mounted and racing south under the bright moon. Miguel led them to where Hank and the twins were holding position on a rocky ridge overlooking a narrow canyon. "They are holed up down there," Hank said quietly as Ryan and Olivia joined them. 6 men, heavily armed. They are waiting for dawn to move the cattle through the canyon. Ryan studied the layout, his tactical mind working. The canyon was narrow with high walls, a natural bottleneck. "We can get above them on both sides. If we time it right, we can pin them down without any shooting. They will have to surrender if they realize they are surrounded and outnumbered. That is assuming they have sense enough to surrender, John Sullivan said grimly. Most rustlers are opportunists, not fighters, Ryan said, but we will be ready either way. He assigned positions, sending Miguel and Jack to the west side of the canyon while he, Olivia, and the others took the east. They climbed in darkness, leading their horses along treacherous rocky paths. Olivia's heart hammered, but her hands were steady on her rifle. This was what ranch life was in Arizona territory. Sometimes you had to fight for what was yours. They got into position just as the sky began to lighten. Below them, Olivia could see the rustlers starting to move, trying to get the cattle through the canyon before full daylight. She glanced at Ryan, who was focused on the scene below, his jaw set with determination. "Now," he said quietly, and his voice carried. "You are surrounded," Ryan called down. "Let the cattle go and ride out with your hands up. Nobody needs to get hurt today." The response was a gunshot that ricocheted off the rocks above their heads. Ryan cursed and returned fire, not aiming to hit but to show they were serious. Below, the rustlers scrambled for cover and the cattle began to panic, milling and bellowing. What followed was a tense standoff, punctuated by sporadic gunfire. The rustlers quickly realized they were indeed surrounded, but they were also boxed in with nowhere to run. Twice Ryan tried to talk them into surrendering, and twice they responded with bullets. "They are going to wait us out," Miguel called from across the canyon. "They figure we have to work our ranches and cannot sit here forever." "Then we give them a reason to move," Ryan said. He turned to Olivia. "Can you get down to that outcropping 20 yards below us? If you can position there, you will have a clear shot at their cover. You do not have to hit anyone, just make them nervous enough to reconsider." Olivia nodded and began working her way down the rocky slope, testing each foothold before trusting her weight to it. Her rifle was slung across her back, and her focus narrowed to the immediate task. Behind her, Ryan kept up covering fire to mask her movement. She reached the outcropping and positioned herself behind a boulder. From here, she had a perfect view of where the rustlers were dug in. She could see their horses tied in the back of the canyon, see the stolen cattle pressed against one wall, see the men peering around rocks trying to spot their attackers. Olivia took careful aim and fired, her bullet striking a rock inches from one man's head. He jerked back with a yelp. She fired again and again, each shot carefully placed to intimidate rather than kill. The rustlers began to panic, realizing they had a sharpshooter positioned where they could not effectively return fire. "All right," one of them finally yelled. "We are done. We are coming out." "Guns on the ground first," Ryan called back. "Then hands where we can see them." Slowly, 6 rifles were tossed out onto the open ground. Then 6 men emerged with their hands raised. Ryan and the others moved down from their positions, keeping their weapons trained on the surrendering rustlers. Olivia climbed back up to the main path and joined them, her legs shaking with released tension. The rustlers were a rough-looking bunch, hard-faced men who had clearly made a living on the wrong side of the law. Ryan had the twins tie their hands while Hank collected their weapons. The stolen cattle, frightened but unharmed, began to calm as the shooting stopped. "What do we do with them?" Jack Sullivan asked. "Take them to the territorial marshal in Prescott," Ryan said. "It is a day's ride, but they need to face proper justice." "That will mean 2 of us gone for at least 2 days, Hank pointed out. "We cannot spare that right now." Ryan's jaw tightened. He knew Hank was right. They were already stretched thin, but letting the rustlers go was not an option either. "I will take them," Olivia said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "I can handle 6 bound men on a day's ride. The rest of you stay and work the ranch. You need the hands more than you need me for a few days." "Absolutely not," Ryan said immediately. "It is too dangerous." "No more dangerous than what we just did," Olivia argued. "They are tied and disarmed. I am a good shot and I can handle myself. You know I can." Ryan looked torn, clearly hating the idea but seeing the logic in it. Finally he said, "You do not go alone. Miguel, go with her. 2 guns are better than 1, and I trust you both to get the job done." Miguel nodded. "We leave within the hour. Get these men on their horses and get moving before the heat hits." The ride to Prescott was long and tense. The rustlers were surly and threatening at first, but Olivia and Miguel ignored their comments and kept their rifles ready. By the time they reached the territorial marshal's office the following afternoon, everyone was exhausted and dusty. The marshal, a tired-looking man named Carson, took the rustlers into custody and listened to Olivia's account of the thefts and the capture. "We have been getting reports of rustling all over this region," he said. "You are lucky you caught them. Most ranchers just have to eat the losses." "We could not afford to," Olivia said bluntly. Marshal Carson looked at her with new respect. "You are Ryan Kincaid's new hand. Word has gotten around about the woman who can outwork most men. Glad to see it is true." The ride back to the ranch felt easier, as though they had shed a weight along with the prisoners. Miguel was quiet as always, but companionable. They stopped to camp one night on the trail, and as they sat by the fire, Olivia asked him about his family in Sonora. "I had a wife once," Miguel said, staring into the flames, "and a daughter. They died of cholera 5 years ago. I came north after that because there was nothing left for me there. Ryan gave me work when I needed it most. I will never forget that." "He is a good man," Olivia said softly. "He is, and he looks at you the way I used to look at my Maria." Miguel smiled slightly. "It is good. He has been alone too long, working himself to death for this ranch. Maybe now he will have something to work for besides just survival." They arrived back at the Double K late the following day to find the ranch quiet and peaceful. Ryan must have been watching for them because he came striding out of the barn before they even dismounted, his face flooding with relief. "Any trouble?" he asked, his eyes on Olivia. "None," she assured him. "The marshal has them locked up. He said he had been tracking that gang for months." Ryan looked like he wanted to pull her into his arms but was conscious of Miguel's presence. Instead, he just nodded and said, "Good work. Both of you, go get cleaned up and rest. You have earned it." That evening, after a simple supper and with the other hands settled in for the night, Ryan knocked on Olivia's cabin door. She opened it to find him standing there with a lantern, his hat in his hands. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course." He stepped inside and closed the door, setting the lantern on the small table. In the warm light, his face was shadowed, serious. "I hated every minute you were gone. I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong." "But they did not," Olivia said gently. "I am fine. We did what needed to be done. I know, and I am proud of you, but it made me realize something." He reached out and took her hands. "Life out here is hard and uncertain. We never know what tomorrow will bring. I do not want to waste time being cautious or proper. Before you left, I told you I was falling in love with you. Now I am telling you I have fallen completely. I love you, Olivia Preston, and I want to spend my life with you." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. "I love you too. I think I have since that first day when you gave me a chance." "Then marry me," Ryan said, his voice urgent. "I do not have a fancy ring yet, and this is not a proper proposal, but I do not care. I want you as my wife, my partner in all of this. Say yes." "Yes," Olivia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course, yes." Ryan pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the passion and relief and love he had been holding back. Olivia kissed him back with equal fervor. her hands fisting in his shirt, feeling like her heart might burst from happiness. They stood there in the small cabin, holding each other as night deepened outside and the ranch settled into peaceful silence. For the first time in months, Olivia felt truly safe, truly home. All the loss and hardship that had brought her to Jerome seemed like necessary steps on a path that led to this moment, to this man, to this life. When, she asked eventually, her head resting on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. As soon as possible, Ryan said. There is a preacher who comes through Jerome once a month. He will be there next week. We can get married then if you want. I want, Olivia confirmed. I do not need anything fancy, just you and a commitment before God and witnesses. Then that is what we will have. The next week passed in a blur of work and anticipation. The other hands were surprised but pleased when Ryan announced the upcoming wedding. Hank clapped Ryan on the back and told him he was a lucky man. Miguel smiled his quiet smile and said he was happy for them both. The twins immediately began planning what they called a proper celebration, which seemed to involve a great deal of whiskey and possibly a fiddle player from town. Maria, when she heard the news, was overjoyed. "Finally!" she exclaimed, hugging Olivia tightly. "I've been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. It is about time you both came to your senses." She insisted on making Olivia a dress for the wedding, refusing to hear any protests. "Every bride deserves something special," she said firmly, "even a practical ranch bride." The dress was simple but beautiful, made from cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Olivia stood in her cabin the morning of the wedding, looking at herself in the small mirror Maria had lent her, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was tanned from sun and wind, her hands were calloused, but her eyes were bright with happiness. The ceremony took place in Jerome's small church, a rough wooden building that served multiple denominations. The preacher was an elderly man named Reverend Matthews, who had been traveling the Arizona Territory for 30 years. He performed the service with genuine warmth, speaking about partnership and perseverance, and the importance of facing life's hardships together. Ryan stood at the front of the church in his best shirt and pants, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving Olivia as she walked down the short aisle. There was no music, no flower petals, no crowd of well-wishers. Just the ranch hands, Maria and a few of her friends, and a handful of townspeople who had heard about the wedding and come out of curiosity. But when Ryan took Olivia's hands and spoke his vows, his voice strong and sure, none of the missing fancy trappings mattered. When Olivia promised to love and honor him through whatever came, tears shining in her eyes, it was as real and binding as any elaborate society wedding. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Matthews said with a smile. "Ryan, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, the small congregation erupted in cheers and applause. The twins whooped loudly, Hank whistled, and Maria wiped tears from her eyes. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than seemed possible. Maria had been cooking for days, and somehow she had recruited half the women from Jerome to help. There was beef and chicken, fresh bread and vegetables, pies and cakes, and yes, the whiskey and fiddle player the twins had promised. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, someone cleared a space for dancing. The fiddle player struck up a lively tune and couples took to the makeshift dance floor. Ryan led Olivia out for the first dance, his hand warm at her waist, spinning her with surprising grace. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, laughing. "My mother taught me before she died," Ryan said. "She insisted that even though we were poor, I should know how to conduct myself properly." I think she would have liked you. I wish I could have met her. Me too. She would have loved your strength and determination." He pulled her closer as the song shifted to something slower. "I am the luckiest man in the territory." "We are both lucky," Olivia corrected. "To have found each other, to have this place, to have a chance at building something real." They danced until the moon rose high and the party began to wind down. One by one, the guests departed. The ranch hands drifted to the bunkhouse, and Maria packed up the remaining food with instructions for reheating. Finally, Ryan and Olivia were alone, standing in the yard of their ranch, the place that was now truly theirs together. Ryan took her hand and led her to the main house. Olivia had moved her few possessions from the cabin that morning, and the house now held touches of both of them. It was strange and wonderful to walk through the door knowing this was her home, that she belonged here not just as a worker, but as a wife and partner. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that felt both new and inevitable. Ryan was gentle, attentive, making sure Olivia felt cherished and desired. She responded with equal passion, feeling like she was finally, completely home in every sense of the word. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Ryan's, now their, bed, talking quietly in the darkness about dreams and plans for the future. "I want to expand the herd," Ryan said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "With the rustlers caught, we should be safe to invest in more breeding stock, maybe even build up the horse training side of things. You have got a real gift with horses." "I would like that," Olivia said, "and maybe eventually a bigger house, something with room for a family." Ryan pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching. "You want children, someday," Olivia said. "Not right away, there is too much work to do, but yes, eventually." "Do you?" "I do," Ryan admitted. "I always figured I would die alone, too focused on building this ranch to build a family. But now, with you, I can imagine it. Children running around the yard, teaching them to ride and rope and love this land the way we do." "Then that is what we will build," Olivia said, kissing him softly. Together. The months that followed were some of the hardest and happiest of Olivia's life. She and Ryan worked side by side every day, equal partners in managing the ranch. She took over more of the horse training, discovering she had a real aptitude for gentling even the most stubborn animals. Ryan focused on expanding their cattle operation, negotiating deals with buyers and carefully selecting breeding stock. The ranch began to prosper in ways it had not before. With two people sharing the burden of management and decision-making, things ran more smoothly. Olivia brought fresh perspectives to problems Ryan had been wrestling with for years, and he provided the experience and connections she lacked. By fall, they had increased their herd by 50 head and sold a dozen well-trained horses to the cavalry for prices that made Ryan whistle in amazement. The ranch was financially stable for the first time since Ryan had bought the land. In October, Olivia missed her monthly courses and realized with a mixture of joy and trepidation that she might be pregnant. She waited another month to be sure, then told Ryan one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Ryan went completely still. Then he turned to her, his face transformed with wonder. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. I have missed 2 months and I have been sick in the mornings." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. I cannot even find words, a baby, our baby." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, even though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Terrified, amazed, grateful, all of those things, but mostly just so incredibly happy." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia continued working as long as she could, but by her 7th month Ryan insisted she scale back. She chafed at the restrictions, but had to admit she was exhausted in ways she had never been before. Her body was doing the hardest work of her life, creating a new life, and it demanded rest. Maria became a frequent presence at the ranch, helping with cooking and cleaning and offering advice from her own experiences with pregnancy. She and Olivia grew close, and Olivia found herself grateful for the older woman's wisdom and kindness. As winter settled over the ranch and Olivia's belly swelled, Ryan became increasingly protective. He hovered, worried constantly, and drove Olivia slightly crazy with his attentiveness. But she knew it came from love, from the fear of losing what they had built together. "I am not made of china," she told him one evening in January as he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "I know," Ryan said, but his eyes were troubled. I cannot lose you. You are everything to me." Olivia softened and took his hand, placing it on her belly where their child was moving. "Feel that. That is our baby, strong and healthy, and I am strong too. I wrestled calves, remember? I can handle childbirth." Ryan laughed despite his worry. "You are the strongest person I know. I should not doubt you." The baby came on a cold February night during a rare Arizona snowstorm. Olivia's water broke as she was helping Maria prepare dinner, and the pain started soon after. Maria sent Ryan racing to town for the midwife, while she helped Olivia to the bedroom and began boiling water and gathering supplies. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen who had delivered half the babies in the county, arrived within an hour. By then, Olivia's pains were coming hard and fast, and she was gripping the bedposts with white-knuckled determination. Ryan was not allowed in the room, a convention that frustrated him immensely. He paced the kitchen while Hank tried to distract him with card games, and the twins made terrible jokes. Miguel sat quietly in the corner, whittling and offering silent support. The labor lasted through the night. Olivia had thought she knew what hard work was, had thought wrestling cattle and riding all day and building a life from nothing was the hardest thing she would ever do. But bringing a child into the world was harder than all of it combined. The pain was immense, all-consuming, and there were moments when she was not sure she could continue. But then she would think of Ryan waiting outside, of the life they had built, of the tiny person who was fighting to be born. And she would find the strength to push through one more contraction, one more wave of agony. Dawn was breaking when the baby finally came, emerging into Mrs. Chen's capable hands with a thin, angry cry. Olivia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure, tears streaming down her face. "It is a boy," Mrs. Chen announced, quickly checking the baby over. "Healthy lungs, all his parts in the right places. You did well, Mama." A boy. Olivia reached for her son, and Mrs. Chen placed him in her arms, still wet and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. He had Ryan's dark hair and a tiny, furious face, his little fists waving as he cried his displeasure at being forced into the cold world. "Hello, little one," Olivia whispered, awe flooding through her. "I am your mama. You are safe now." The door burst open and Ryan rushed in, his face pale and strained. He stopped at the sight of Olivia holding their baby, and his expression crumpled with relief and wonder. "Come meet your son," Olivia said, smiling through her tears. Ryan approached slowly, like he was afraid to believe it was real. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby, his hand shaking as he reached out to touch one tiny fist. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around Ryan's finger, and Ryan made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is perfect," Ryan said hoarsely. "You are perfect. Thank you. "Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," Olivia said. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Ryan said, "I always liked the name Thomas after my father, but only if you agree." "Thomas Kincaid," Olivia said, testing it out. "I like it, Tommy for short." "Thomas Ryan Kincaid," Ryan said, adding his own name as the middle. "Welcome to the world, son." The weeks after Tommy's birth were exhausting and wonderful. Olivia had thought she knew what tired was, but caring for a newborn was a level of sleeplessness she had not imagined. Tommy nursed constantly, cried for no discernible reason, and refused to sleep for more than 2 hours at a stretch. But he was also miraculous. The way he fit perfectly in the crook of her arm, the soft baby smell of him, his tiny fingers and toes, the way he would quiet instantly when Ryan sang to him in his low, rumbling voice. Every difficult moment was balanced by moments of pure joy. Ryan was a devoted father, getting up with Olivia for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Tommy when he was fussy. He would stand over the cradle for long minutes just watching their son sleep, his face soft with wonder. The ranch hands were surprisingly taken with the baby. Hank carved a set of wooden blocks, Miguel made a tiny pair of leather booties, and the twins competed to see who could make Tommy laugh first. Even the horses seemed to sense something precious had arrived, becoming extra gentle when Olivia walked through the barn with Tommy in her arms. As winter gave way to spring, and Tommy grew from a tiny newborn into a chunky, smiling baby, life settled into new rhythms. Olivia began working again, taking Tommy with her as she did lighter tasks around the ranch. She would nurse him in the barn while checking on horses, or set him in a basket in the shade while she mended tack. Ryan had hired an additional hand to help cover the work, a young man named Peter who was eager to learn and took direction well. This gave both Ryan and Olivia more flexibility to balance work with caring for Tommy. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching Tommy attempt to crawl on a blanket, Ryan said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Olivia asked, ready to jump up if Tommy got too close to the edge of the blanket. "I want to officially make you a partner in the ranch, not just my wife but a legal co-owner. You have put as much into this place as I have. It should be half yours on paper, not just in my heart." Olivia looked at him in surprise. "You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to." "I want to. You have earned it 100 times over, and if something happens to me, I want to make sure you and Tommy are protected. The ranch should go to you, no questions asked." The practicality of his words could not hide the love behind them. "Then yes," Olivia said. "Thank you for seeing me as an equal partner." "You are more than equal," Ryan said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me and this ranch." They had the papers drawn up in Prescott the following month, officially making Olivia co-owner of the Double K Ranch. It was a rare thing in 1883 for a woman to have such legal standing, but Ryan insisted, and Olivia felt a deep sense of pride seeing her name on the deed. Tommy's first birthday came in February of 1884, and they celebrated with a small party at the ranch. The boy was walking now, toddling around on unsteady legs, getting into everything with the determined curiosity that seemed to be his defining trait. He looked like Ryan but had Olivia's green eyes and her stubborn chin. As Olivia watched her son smash his face into a cake Maria had baked, getting frosting everywhere while everyone laughed, she felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what she had been searching for when she had arrived in Jerome 18 months ago with $6 and a desperate need for work. Not just survival, but a real life full of love and purpose and family. That night, after Tommy was asleep and the ranch was quiet, Ryan pulled Olivia into his arms on the porch, their favorite place to sit and talk. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For being brave enough to wrestle those calves in Jerome. For giving me a chance to know you. For building this life with me, for Tommy, for everything." He kissed her softly. "I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I loved you desperately then." "I love you too," Olivia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "You gave me more than a job that day. You gave me a home, a family, a future. You gave me everything." They stood there together as the stars came out, holding each other and watching the land they had built together stretch out in the moonlight. Somewhere in the barn a horse nickered softly. From Tommy's room came the peaceful sound of baby breathing. The ranch was quiet, prosperous, secure. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and hard work and profound joy. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. When he was 3, Olivia found herself pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to do. Their daughter was born in the summer of 1886, a tiny dark-haired girl they named Sarah Jane. She was quieter than Tommy had been, more contemplative, watching the world with serious dark eyes. Tommy was fascinated with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Ryan and Olivia watched their children together with hearts full to bursting. The ranch continued to grow. They added more land, bought adjoining property from a retiring rancher, built a bigger barn and a new bunkhouse. The crew expanded to 8 permanent hands, and they were known throughout the territory for quality horses and cattle. Olivia became something of a legend in ranching circles, the woman who could outwork most men and had proven herself through sheer determination. She was invited to judge horse shows, asked her opinion on breeding stock, respected by men who might otherwise have dismissed her because of her gender. But more than any of that external validation, she was happy. She had built a life that mattered, with a man she loved more with each passing year, surrounded by children and land and meaningful work. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryan surprised her by having the small cabin where she had first stayed renovated into a proper guest house. "For when your cousins visit," he said, referencing distant relatives Olivia had recently reconnected with. "Or for when Tommy and Sarah want to bring friends to stay. Or just for when we need time away from the noise." But Olivia knew what he was really saying, that he valued those early days when she had been just a ranch hand in a tiny cabin, proving herself one difficult task at a time. That he had not forgotten where they had started or how far they had come. That evening they left the children with Maria and rode out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a high ridge that overlooked the valley. They sat on a blanket, sharing a simple meal and watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build. "If you could go back," Ryan asked, "to that day in Jerome when you were wrestling calves, desperate and exhausted, would you change anything?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "Maybe I would have eaten more before trying to impress everyone," she said with a laugh. "I nearly passed out from hunger. But no, I would not change the important things. Every hard moment, every struggle led me here, led me to you." "I am glad you came to Jerome," Ryan said. "I am glad I happened to be there that day. I am glad I was smart enough to see what you were offering and brave enough to say you start tomorrow." "Those 4 words changed my life," Olivia said softly. "You start tomorrow." It was not just a job offer, it was a promise of a future. "And we have built that future," Ryan said, gesturing to the ranch spread out below them. "Together, exactly like we promised." As darkness fell and stars began to emerge, they packed up their meal and rode back to the ranch house where warm light spilled from the windows, and the sound of children's laughter drifted on the evening breeze. They put the horses away together, working in the comfortable silence of long partnership, then walked hand in hand to the house. Tommy came running to meet them at the door, Sarah toddling behind him, and they swept their children up in hugs and kisses. Maria smiled from where she was setting out supper and said, "These two were angels as always." Well, mostly angels. The family gathered around the table, saying grace before the meal as they always did. Ryan thanked God for the food, for the ranch, for the family gathered there, for the many blessings they had received. Olivia added her own silent thanks, for the strength to keep going when everything had seemed lost, for the chance encounter in Jerome, for the cowboy who had seen her potential and given her a tomorrow. After supper, after the children were bathed and stories were read and prayers were said, after the house finally quieted and the lanterns were dimmed, Ryan and Olivia lay in their bed and talked quietly about plans for the coming year. "I want to add more breeding mares," Olivia said. "There is good demand for quality stock, and we have the facilities now." "Agreed. And I have been thinking we should invest in better irrigation for the south pasture. It would let us graze more cattle without worrying so much about drought." They talked through details and logistics, making plans the way they had for 10 years, equal partners in every decision. Eventually, the conversation drifted into silence, and Ryan pulled Olivia close, her head resting on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. "I love you," he said, the words as true and necessary as the first time he had spoken them. "I love you too," Olivia replied, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. She thought back to that desperate woman who had arrived in Jerome with nothing, who had thrown herself into physical challenges to prove her worth, who had been so focused on survival that she had not even imagined the possibility of genuine happiness. That woman seemed like a stranger now, though Olivia remembered her with compassion and pride. She had been strong enough to keep going when everything had been against her, and that strength had led her here. The ranch that Ryan had built alone and then they had built together was more than just land and cattle and horses. It was a testament to what could be created when two people worked side by side with mutual respect and love. It was a legacy they would pass to their children, a piece of Arizona territory carved out with sweat and determination and hope. As sleep claimed her, Olivia's last conscious thought was of that spring morning in Jerome, the dust rising in the branding corral, the exhaustion in her bones, and the moment when Ryan Kincaid had looked at her and said, "You start tomorrow." She had started, and she had never stopped, building a life beyond anything she had imagined possible, and she knew with absolute certainty that every difficult step had been worth it. The years continued to unfold in their rich complexity. Tommy grew into a skilled horseman by age 8, already showing signs of his father's tactical mind and his mother's determination. Sarah proved to have a gift for numbers, keeping track of cattle counts and feed supplies with impressive accuracy for one so young. In 1889, Olivia gave birth to their third child, another boy they named James. He was a happy baby with Ryan's dark hair and a sunny disposition that made everyone smile. Tommy and Sarah doted on their little brother, and the ranch house was full of noise and life and love. The territory was changing around them. More settlers arrived, towns grew, railroads extended their reach. The wild, lawless character of the early days was gradually giving way to something more civilized, though the land itself remained harsh and demanding. Ryan and Olivia adapted to the changes, finding new markets for their stock, adopting new techniques they learned from agricultural journals, always pushing to improve and grow. But they never forgot the fundamental truths that had brought them together: hard work, mutual respect, and the understanding that building something lasting required both strength and flexibility. When Tommy was 15, he asked his father if he could start managing the horse training operation. Ryan agreed, with Olivia's blessing, and they watched with pride as their son took to the responsibility with maturity beyond his years. He had learned well from both his parents, combining Ryan's patience with Olivia's intuitive understanding of animal behavior. Sarah, at 12, announced she wanted to learn bookkeeping and business management. She apprenticed with the ranch accountant in Prescott, riding into town twice a week for lessons. Olivia accompanied her on these trips, and they used the time together to talk about everything from ranch business to life and dreams and the future. James, still young, seemed to have inherited the best of both his parents. He was determined like Olivia, but had Ryan's even temperament. He loved the cattle work especially, and could often be found following Hank around, asking endless questions about breeding and grazing and range management. On a spring evening in 1895, as Olivia and Ryan sat on their porch watching the sun set over the land they had worked for 13 years, Ryan said, "We should think about what comes next." "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, though she suspected she knew. "Tommy is 17 now, practically running the horse operation on his own. Sarah is 15 and has a better head for numbers than either of us ever did. James is 10 and already knows more about cattle than most cowboys twice his age. We have built this ranch for them, but we should start officially transitioning ownership." Olivia nodded slowly. "You are right. We should start making it legal, making sure they know they are not just inheriting property but inheriting responsibility. And we should start thinking about what we want to do with the rest of our lives," Ryan continued. "We are both still young, only in our early 40s. We have got a lot of years ahead of us. I want to spend some of them traveling with you, seeing parts of the country we have never been to. Maybe even taking that trip to San Francisco you have always talked about." "You would leave the ranch?" Olivia asked in surprise. "Not leave, but step back. Let the kids run things for a while. They are ready, or they will be soon, and I trust them completely. They have grown up in this life, understand it in their bones." He took her hand. "You and I built this together, starting from nothing. We have earned the right to enjoy it without working ourselves into the ground every single day." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. The ranch had been their entire focus for so long. Olivia was not sure she knew who she was without that daily structure. But Ryan was right. They had earned some rest, some enjoyment of what they had created. Over the following year, they gradually transitioned responsibilities to their children. Tommy officially became head of horse operations, with his own salary and full authority to make purchasing and training decisions. Sarah took over the books and accounts, managing payroll and tracking expenses with impressive efficiency. James, though still young, was given oversight of the cattle operation under Hank's mentorship. The transition was not without challenges. Tommy made mistakes in his first year, misjudging the readiness of 2 horses he sold and having to make it right with the buyers. Sarah struggled with a ranch hand who did not want to take financial direction from a teenage girl, and Ryan had to intervene. James got impatient with Hank's slow, methodical approach and nearly made a costly error in cattle purchasing. But Ryan and Olivia were there to guide them through each challenge, offering advice when asked, but increasingly letting their children learn from their own mistakes. It was hard to step back, to watch them struggle with decisions that seemed obvious from the vantage point of experience. But it was also necessary, the only way the next generation would truly learn to run the ranch. By 1897, the transition was largely complete. Tommy, Sarah, and James were running the Double K with minimal input from their parents. The ranch was more prosperous than ever, having survived droughts and market fluctuations, and all the challenges that came with ranching in Arizona territory. Ryan and Olivia took their trip to San Francisco that fall, leaving the ranch in their children's capable hands for 6 weeks. It was strange and wonderful to be away from the daily demands of ranch life, to sleep in hotels and eat in restaurants, and see the ocean for the first time. They walked along the waterfront, toured the city, attended a proper theater performance, and rediscovered each other away from the roles of rancher and parents. "We should do this more often," Olivia said one evening as they walked back to their hotel, her arm linked through Ryan's. "We should," Ryan agreed. "Though I have to admit I miss the ranch, miss the kids, miss the horses, miss the smell of desert sage in the morning." "Me too," Olivia laughed. "We can take the rancher out of the ranch for a few weeks, but we cannot take the ranch out of the rancher." They returned home to find everything running smoothly. The children had handled a minor crisis with a sick cow, had successfully completed a horse sale, and had kept all the accounts up to date. They were proud of their accomplishments, and rightly so. Life settled into a new rhythm. Ryan and Olivia were still involved in the ranch, still worked when needed, but they also had time for other things. They took regular trips, sometimes just overnight rides to favorite spots on the ranch, sometimes longer journeys to Prescott or Tucson or even back to San Francisco. They also became active in the community in new ways. Olivia joined efforts to establish a proper school in the area, serving on the board and helping to raise funds for a building and teacher's salary. Ryan worked with other ranchers to form a cattlemen's association to advocate for better water rights and grazing policies. In 1900, Tommy married a local girl named Elizabeth, and they built a house on the western edge of the ranch property. Olivia and Ryan gained their first grandchild in 1901, a baby girl named Emma, who had Tommy's dark hair and her mother's blue eyes. Holding that tiny granddaughter, Olivia felt the circle of life completing in the most beautiful way. Sarah married in 1903, choosing a young lawyer from Prescott who supported her independent nature and business acumen. They split their time between a house in town and the ranch, Sarah continuing to manage the books remotely. James, at 18, was still too focused on the cattle operation to think much about courting, though Olivia had noticed him paying attention to Maria's niece, who sometimes helped with cooking. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1908, Ryan and Olivia's children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, the old crew members who had worked with them in those early days, business associates, family friends. The gathering was held in the big barn, decorated with lanterns and flowers, long tables groaning with food. Tommy stood up to give a toast, his own children now, 2 girls and a boy, sitting with their mother. "25 years ago, my parents built something from nothing. They took raw land and determination and turned it into a legacy. But more than that, they built a partnership based on love and respect and absolute equality. They showed all of us what marriage should look like, what working together really means. Everything we have, everything we are, comes from their example." To Ryan and Olivia Kincaid, the best parents and ranchers anyone could ask for. The crowd raised their glasses and cheered. Olivia felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by love and gratitude. She looked at Ryan and saw his eyes were wet too, his face transformed with emotion. They danced together as they had on their wedding night, moving slowly to fiddle music while their family and friends watched. Ryan's hair was gray at the temples now. There were lines at the corners of Olivia's eyes. They had both been weathered by sun and hard work. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love in a dusty branding corral, who had promised to build a life together against all odds. "We did it," Ryan said softly as they danced. "Everything we dreamed of and more." "We did," Olivia agreed. "And it is still not finished. We have got grandchildren to spoil, a ranch to watch grow, more life to live together." "I would not want to live it with anyone else," Ryan said, pulling her closer. "You are still the strongest, most magnificent woman I have ever known." "And I am still the luckiest man alive that you said yes." "I am the lucky one," Olivia corrected. "You saw me when I was desperate and exhausted, and you said you start tomorrow. Those words gave me back my life." "We gave each other life," Ryan said. "Real life, full of purpose and love and meaning." They danced until the music stopped, until their family pulled them back to the table for cake and more toasts and laughter. The party went late into the night, full of joy and celebration of a marriage that had endured and flourished through everything the harsh land could throw at it. As the years continued to pass, Ryan and Olivia gradually stepped further back from active ranch management. They were in their 60s now, still healthy and active but content to let the younger generation handle the daily operations. They kept a small house in Prescott where they spent winters, returning to the ranch for the warmer months. But no matter where they were physically, the ranch remained the center of their world. They watched with pride as Tommy expanded the horse breeding operation, as Sarah's business acumen led to profitable new contracts, as James developed innovative grazing techniques that other ranchers studied and adopted. The grandchildren grew, 10 of them eventually, scattered between Tommy's, Sarah's, and James's families. They all spent time on the ranch, learning to ride and rope and work cattle just as their parents had. Olivia and Ryan spent hours with them, passing on stories and skills and values. In 1915, Arizona Territory officially became Arizona State. Ryan and Olivia attended the celebration in Phoenix, watching as the formal ceremonies marked the transition from frontier territory to established state. It felt appropriate, the end of one era and the beginning of another. "We are part of history," Olivia said as they watched the festivities. "We were here when this was still wild territory, when it took guts and determination just to survive. We helped build something permanent." "And it will outlast us," Ryan said, gesturing to where their children and grandchildren stood together. "They will carry it forward, and their children after them." They returned to the ranch after the statehood celebration, to the land that had become so thoroughly theirs over 3 decades. The main house had been expanded twice, the barn rebuilt once after a fire, the fences repaired and replaced countless times. But the heart of it remained the same, a piece of Arizona carved out through love and work and unwavering partnership. On a warm spring evening in 1920, Ryan and Olivia sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the pastures where cattle grazed and horses ran. They were both 70 now, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard physical labor, but their minds were still sharp, and their love for each other had only deepened. "You remember that first day?" Olivia asked, holding Ryan's weathered hand. "When you watched me wrestle those calves in Jerome?" "Every detail," Ryan said. "The dust, the heat, the way you refused to give up even though you were shaking with exhaustion, the absolute determination in your eyes. I knew in that moment that you were special. And you gave me a chance when you had no reason to trust me." "Best decision I ever made," Ryan said firmly. "Well, second best. The best was asking you to marry me." Olivia laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet evening. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life," Ryan confirmed. Better than I ever imagined possible when I was a broke cowboy sleeping in barns and dreaming of owning my own land. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. From somewhere in the ranch, a horse whinnied. A grandchild's laughter drifted from the bunkhouse where the younger generation was gathered. The smell of Maria's cooking. She was elderly now but still came to help with big family meals, wafted from the kitchen. Everything they had built, everything they had fought for, surrounded them in tangible form. The ranch that had started as one man's dream had become a family legacy, a thriving operation that employed dozens of people and contributed to the prosperity of the entire region. And at the center of it all was the partnership between a cowboy who had been willing to take a chance and a desperate woman who had proven herself through sheer determination. "You start tomorrow," Olivia said softly, echoing those words from so long ago. Best words I ever heard. "You start tomorrow," Ryan repeated, "and you never stopped. You have been starting new tomorrows with me for 38 years. I hope we have a lot more left." "We will," Olivia said with confidence. "We are too stubborn to do anything else." They sat on that porch until the stars filled the sky, holding hands and counting their blessings, grateful for every challenge they had overcome and every joy they had shared. The wild west of their youth was mostly gone now, tamed by railroads and statehood and the steady march of civilization. But the spirit that had built it, the determination and partnership and love that had carved civilization from wilderness, that lived on in the ranch they had built and the family they had raised. And when they finally rose and walked hand in hand into the house, ready for bed after a long and satisfying day, they knew they would wake up tomorrow ready to start again, just as they had every day for nearly 4 decades. Together, always together, building something that would last long after they were gone. That was their legacy, not just the land and cattle and horses, but the example of what two people could create when they respected each other's strength, supported each other's dreams, and never stopped fighting for the life they wanted to build. It was a love story written in dust and sweat and determination, and it would endure as long as the Arizona sun rose over the Double K Ranch.